You know, it's fascinating. Almost every ancient civilization on Earth, from Mesopotamia to ancient Greece, tells a story about a massive, world-ending flood. But here's a thought. What if the real story isn't the flood itself, but what happened before it?
Yeah, what if these ancient texts weren't just describing a flood, but a whole world that was ruled by giants? A world that got so out of hand, so corrupt, that the only solution was to, well, wash it all away.
So what's going on here? Is this just, a coincidence, a common myth that just happens to pop up everywhere? Or is there something more to it? To figure that out, we've got to dive into what these ancient texts actually say. Okay, so our investigation starts in a familiar place, but with a really bizarre passage. It's this short, super strange couple of verses tucked away right before the famous story of Noah's Ark. And honestly, it's been puzzling scholars for literally centuries. Right? I mean, this just drops a bombshell and then moves on. It leaves you with so many questions, like, who are these Nephilim? And what does it even mean, sons of God? And why call their kids heroes of old? The text just presents this absolutely wild scenario, and then, poof, it's on to the next thing.
All right, let's break this down. That first word, Nephilim. The name itself is a huge clue. It comes from this Hebrew root word naphal, which means to fall. So we're not just talking about giants here. The name literally means the fallen ones. That immediately suggests they fell from, well, somewhere higher.
And what about their dads, these sons of God? Now, when we hear that today, we might immediately think of angels. But back then, to the original audience, that phrase meant something different. It referred to members of a divine council, sort of lesser heavenly beings who served the Most High God. So this isn't just a story about angels misbehaving, it's about a serious transgression, a crossing of the line between the divine realm and the human one. So that little snippet in Genesis, turns out that's just the tip of the iceberg. It's like the trailer. Other ancient Jewish texts, like the Book of Enoch and the Book of Giants, they give you the full story, the dramatic backstory that Genesis just hints at.
So here's how the story goes in those other books. You've got this group of divine beings, they're called the Watchers. They come down to Earth, they take human wives, and their children are this hybrid race, the giants. But it gets worse. These giants and their fathers start teaching humanity all this forbidden knowledge, and the world just descends into violence and chaos. In this version of the story, the Great Flood isn't just about human sin anymore. It's the divine response to this huge cosmic rebellion.
And look, when these texts say giants, they are not messing around. The Book of Enoch claims they were 300 cubits tall. That's, about 450 feet? Can you even imagine? We're talking about beings on a truly monstrous scale, literally towering over the entire landscape. But the problem wasn't just that they were huge and violent. It went way deeper. The text described them as being, and this is a great term, ontologically flawed. Basically, they were a mix of divine and mortal that just shouldn't exist. They broke the rules of creation. Their very being was a form of cosmic chaos. Okay, and this is where the mystery gets even bigger. This whole theme, rebellious divine beings, cosmic chaos, a world-ending judgment, it wasn't just a Hebrew story. You find these incredible parallels in other major cultures all across the ancient world. Just think about Greek and Roman myths for a second. They had the titans and the giants, right? These were also these ancient, powerful beings who waged war against the main gods, the Olympians. And how did that story end? With their defeat and imprisonment in the abyss of Tartarus. It's the same core story, a massive battle for cosmic order. And hey, this connection isn't something we're just making up. Now, the ancient Jewish scholars who translated their scriptures into Greek, way back in the 3rd century BCE, they saw it too. When they came to the word Nephilim, they translated it as gigantes, the Greek word for giants. And another Hebrew term for these beings, Rephaim, they translated as Titanis, or titans. They were basically saying, hey, you know those stories you have about titans and giants? Yeah, that's what we're talking about. The rabbit hole goes even deeper, all the way to Mesopotamia. Get this, in fragments of the Book of Giants found with the Dead Sea Scrolls, they actually name the legendary Mesopotamian hero Gilgamesh as one of these primordial giants. It's incredible. It shows that these cultures weren't living in bubbles. There was this shared mythological landscape where stories and heroes were being swapped and blended together.
Okay, so we've established this powerful story was everywhere. But what did it all mean to the people telling it? I mean, were they really trying to record a history of literal 450-foot-tall beings? Or was this all a giant metaphor for something else?
Well, for most scholars, the whole giant thing was symbolic, a really powerful symbol. These giants could have represented the memory of old tyrannical kings, or maybe some terrifying warrior clans from the distant past. On a deeper level, they were a metaphor for pride and corruption, a way to explain where evil came from, and a pretty good reason for needing a catastrophic flood to hit the reset button.
And you know, these myths weren't just for telling stories around the campfire, they had real-world political uses. Take the famous Pergamum altar. It's covered in these amazing sculptures of the Olympian gods beating the stuffing out of the giants. This was pure state propaganda. King Eumenes II had it built to basically say, my recent military victory is just like the gods defeating chaos. The message couldn't be clearer. My rule brings divine order, so don't mess with it.
All right, so let's put it all together. We've looked at the cryptic clues, the expanded director's cuts, and the wild cross-cultural connections. So, what's the final verdict on this whole ancient mystery? Really, it all boils down to the big question everyone wants to know, right? Did giants actually walk the earth?
When you look at all the textual evidence, the answer isn't really about biology. It's about ideology. The story of giants, it was a powerful, flexible tool for the ancient world to grapple with its biggest questions, like the nature of evil, the line between God and man, and that timeless struggle between order and chaos.
So in the end, the real mystery isn't whether giants walked the earth. It's not about finding giant fossils or footprints. The real, and I think much more interesting mystery is, why were so many different civilizations so convinced